Hey, well, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about Journey to Bethlehem, the latest sort of faith-based Christmas musical that's just hitting theaters. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So Christmas movies are really about as much a staple of the holiday season as Santa Claus and presents and candy canes and all that fun stuff. But most of them tend to focus on Santa Claus and his reindeer and Frosty and sort of more that side of the holiday celebration. But A Journey to Bethlehem is here to kind of return the focus back to more of the religious roots of the Christmas season. All the familiar elements of the classic nativity story are present and accounted for, although presented maybe in a way that is a bit unfamiliar and unusual because this film is a musical. And let me say, one of the challenges of reviewing movies is that you end up seeing all movies, even movies that maybe where you aren't the target audience. And I'll admit that just when it comes to like my own personal taste, sort of a low budget, kind of sentimental, faith-based musical isn't necessarily my cup of eggnog. This is not a movie that I would rush to see just on my own outside of the purpose of reviewing it. But that being said, I think, well, Journey to Bethlehem, it is an easy movie to nitpick and to criticize. But it's a very difficult one to feel any real kind of cynicism towards. Yes, there is as much cheese in this as a Little Caesars hot and ready pizza, but there's also this in a very endearing earnestness to the whole thing. This film is almost overpoweringly wholesome, very earnest, inoffensive, and I do think it does have enough of like craftsmanship. It does have enough heart that although I'm not necessarily the target audience for this movie, I think people that are the target audiences will find a lot to enjoy in this film. The decision to tell this nativity story in sort of a more unconventional musical format does give it a sense of identity, a kind of a unique place in sort of an increasingly crowded sort of field of holiday movies. Probably the best way to describe sort of what this movie is that Disney's live-action adaptation of Aladdin in 2019 gave Princess Jasmine a new song called Speechless, and Journey to Bethlehem is essentially that song spread into a full-length movie and then applied to like a biblical source material. It's sort of equal parts The Chosen meets High School Musical meets a local church nativity play, and kind of capturing the best and maybe some of the worst elements of each of those three comparisons. But one of the things that this film does have going in its favor is almost an unexpectedly, at least for me personally, kind of a very playful and self-aware tone that embraces its own silliness in a way that sort of disarms what might lead me to be skeptical or overly cynical about it. I think some Christians might find the lighthearted approach almost a little too irreverent, given the importance, the lofty nature of the actual Christmas story. But there is something that's just undeniably amusing about like the angel Gabriel, who's played by hip hop artist Lecrae, kind of nervously rehearsing his monumental speech to Mary, or the Magi, the three wise men, kind of debating like the ambiguous nature of myrrh as a gift for Jesus. It definitely can be corny at times. There's a lot of corny elements in this film, but it's clearly having a lot of fun. I don't think it ever crosses the line too much of like becoming like a spoof, but it definitely presents itself with a very knowing smile all throughout. And this film, it is a musical, which means there's plenty of songs to go around. And despite beginning with a very sort of traditional rendering of O Come, Emmanuel, the music quickly kind of morphs into a bit of a more modern sound. I think any audience is expecting, classic Christmas hymns should instead brace for more kind of modern dance songs and Roman soldiers doing like TikTok dances in the streets. I do think the songs themselves are kind of across the board are pretty solid, although maybe it's missing sort of that one breakout kind of infectious smash hit that a lot of musicals kind of need to have to really elevate it. But the songs themselves, they are solid, they're good. I'll admit, even as a non-musical person, that I've had some of the melodies and stuff have been kind of jingling around in my head ever since I've seen it, which is definitely a good sign for a musical. And I think that the film does balance enough of sort of the fun, upbeat, peppy songs with kind of the more emotional power ballads to keep things interesting. And speaking of interesting, Antonio Banderas, he's in this movie. I don't know how he ended up in this thing, but I'm glad he did because he plays King Herod and he is great in this film. He is definitely the standout character in this. He does deliver just a very delightfully hammy uh, performance where he's chewing the scenery in every scene. Hey, I was there for it, and I think the rest of the actors, they're all fine too. That most of them are kind of relative unknowns, or else they're like individuals that are better known for like musical careers or things outside of acting. But like the actor and actresses that plays Mary and Joseph respectively, they're both good. They're both kind of, they fit the role, sort of the doughy-eyed kind of young lovers. As far as kind of the story itself, it is telling the traditional Christmas story, although it is very focused on Mary's journey in particular, kind of her character. Mary herself, the kind of the historical Mary, is arguably the most revered, beloved woman who has ever walked this earth. So I do think there is value in humanizing her a bit, even if it does get a little guilty of veering into some cliches and a bit more of like a modern feminist present or depiction of her that probably wasn't accurate to the times. But it is an effective reminder that Mary was not only a real person when this happened, but she was a very young person through this story. She wasn't just sort of an archetype for some classic story. She was a human. She dealt with sort of the emotional toll of this kind of monumental assignment. And I do think this film explores some of that. Obviously, it's very lighthearted. It doesn't get super deep, but in ways that is kind of uncommon or unusual for a lot of kind of Christmas stories. Although I will also say that I did feel a bit that because the focus is so much on Mary as a character, that sort of the heart of the Christmas story itself and the birth of Jesus and what all that meant almost gets a bit lost in that kind of in that journey. Because even like when Jesus shows up as a baby and he's born, the moment itself almost comes across more as like a personal victory for Mary, and sort of that she overcame her doubts and her lack of faith and criticism and stuff to persevere, rather than kind of really making it clear the significance and like a divine monumental historical event. So I do think that it is a bit of a give and take in focusing it so specifically on Mary. I liked a lot of it. I just had a few questions about it. As far as content to consider, things going on in the surface of this thing, there's nothing. Language, there's no language. Kind of the closest this film gets is in one of the songs, the one that Antonio Banderas sings. In the chorus, there's a refrain where he says, "So stinking good." But that's as far as it goes, as far as like language. Violence, there's no violence. There's a character that gets sort of in prison, thrown in a dungeon, and the implication is that he's about to be tortured, but it's played comedically, and you don't actually see him being tortured, so nothing there. Sexuality, nothing there beyond just Mary, singing about being a virgin and some of that, but nothing gratuitous or concerning in that. And maybe just there are multiple conversations or scenes where characters are drinking wine or talking about, a different vintage. But really, as far as content, this is about as clean as it comes. As far as themes, things going on kind of beneath the surface of this film, kind of the main thing that this film is getting at is this idea that kind of faith in God, kind of having faith in God's bigger purposes for your life. Because the story itself is familiar to most, or should be, to most Christians. We sort of know, that God had a very important plan for Mary's life. But what maybe we don't think about as much is, did Mary have plans for her own life? Sort of what was that revelation? What did that do to her own, future and sort of her own emotional, what she was striving for? And what did she sort of give up, sacrifice for the sake of sort of joining this bigger story? And that is, in a lot of ways, sort of the main focus of this movie. And obviously, this movie does take, even as the end of this sort of a title slide reveals, like it takes creative liberties. We don't know the answers to that. That's not revealed in Scripture itself. In this story, she's very much portrayed as like a very headstrong young woman who has dreams of being a teacher and has dreams of marrying for love. And kind of the rug gets pulled out from under both of those with the revelation of that she's going to bear the Son of God, and then also that she's being an arranged marriage to Joseph. And there's a conversation kind of in her engagement to Joseph where she's talking with her mom right before that moment, where she says, "Why even make plans if everything is decided for me?" And her mother responds, "Sometimes God's plans for us are even bigger than we can imagine. You must let your faith guide you." And even to a lesser extent, Joseph kind of has the same journey. He's also part of an arranged marriage, and he's caught off guard. His marriage to Mary doesn't look like he thought it would, with her being chosen to give birth to to Jesus, and kind of in one of their songs together, where they unite under this kind of shared question. They do sing, "We have to trust what we don't understand. It could be part of God's plan." So I think there is value in this. Obviously, the focus on a larger level is this sort of the Christmas story and what's going on. But I think it's also just a story about us, about Christians, about sort of that faith journey and trusting God and things that we don't understand. Obviously, Mary and Joseph had a very specific, special, important, exalted task from God that we know that all Christians won't share. But all Christians are called to follow, to bear their cross, to follow after Jesus. So I think there is stuff that thematically can apply even beyond just Christmas itself. So kind of as a whole, I think Journey to Bethlehem succeeds in being the type of film that it wants to be, and I do think it will probably land with the audience that it's primarily aimed for. I think it is personally, I find a lot of it a bit hokey, a bit corny, but its heart is so firmly and clearly in the right place. And I do think that the songs are catchy, and sort of the musical aspect does make it a unique experience. It does give it sort of a new identity. So I think as far as this Christians looking for something wholesome, something kind of fun, something fresh to watch this holiday season, they can definitely do worse than go check out Journey to Bethlehem. But hey, we'd love to hear what you think. If you go see this movie, if you're a musical person, if you're like me and you're not necessarily super amped up about musicals, either way, jump in the comment section and let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed it, if you didn't enjoy it, we'd love to have a conversation with you about that. And if you haven't done so, I encourage you guys, subscribe to our channel, become a Collider. I got lots of movie reviews and podcasts and just other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, stay safe. Thanks for watching, and continue to collide with your world for Christ.